Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. The majority of us in the hobby work off of a limited budget. Now, some may be a little bit more than others, but there are very few of us out there that have unlimited funds that can go out and just buy any card that they want. So, the struggle for some collectors is all right, with my limited funds, how am I ever going to be able to afford some of the big cards out there that you may want in your collection that would be normally way out of your price range? Well, one of the ways to do that is to take your collection and consolidate it. Maybe there's some cards that you don't really care that much about anymore or don't fit into your current focus of your collection. Sell those cards and then take that money and be able to afford a more expensive card. So that's the question that Graig over at MidLife Sports Cards is asking everyone for his question of the week. Is it good to consolidate your card collection and focus on maybe some more expensive cards, some cards that you think are going to hold their value or increase their value over time? Is it good for collectors to do that? Well, there's no right or wrong way to collect. And I think collectors in general fall into two general categories. There's ones that focus on quantity, and then there's those that focus on quality. Now, when I mean quality, I'm not necessarily saying cards that are in high number grades. It could be just a smaller collection, a more focused collection, and may include more expensive cards, but it doesn't necessarily have to. But in this case, for the question that Graig is asking, is it good for collectors to consolidate, sell off some of their cards in their collection, and then use that money to be able to go out and purchase larger, more expensive cards? Now, for me, I fall on the side of quantity. I love baseball cards, Wade Boggs cards, vintage baseball cards. And obviously, with my Wade Boggs collection, my goal is to get as many different cards of his as possible. So that's definitely on the quantity side. And even for my vintage baseball card collection, I want as many different vintage baseball cards that I can. But because of my limited budget, it comes with some limitations that I know I have to deal with, and it's a choice that I have made. It means that by focusing on quantity, I'm not going to be able to afford a lot of the really expensive cards that are out there. In fact, the only time that I am really able to buy anything of, several $100s, maybe $1,000 or more, is at the National, and that's only because I save up for an entire year to be able to have enough money to go out and maybe buy a card that is worth $1,000 or more. In fact, this year, my goal is to hopefully find a 1954 Topps Hank Aaron rookie card. That would be my big goal, my big card for the National. And for the most part, that would be my big purchase for the entire year. Now, the way I look at it, and again, this is just my viewpoint, to me, there's a little bit more something special about the sacrifice that I am making to be able to afford an expensive card. Saving up for an entire year to be able to spend maybe $2,000, $2,500 on a low grade, but a 1954 Topps Hank Aaron. The fact that I made that sacrifice for an entire year, saved up for an entire year, when I do find that right copy, I think it's going to make it just even more special for me. knowing what it took for me to be able to afford that card. Now, are there cards in my collection that I could put on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, you name it, and generate $2,500 and just go out and buy a Hank Aaron rookie card? Sure. I could do that. I could find cards in my collection and decide, yep, I'm going to sell these 5, 10, 15 cards, whatever it would take, and immediately have that money and go out and buy the card. While I would still be excited to own that Hank Aaron rookie card, I think I'm going to enjoy it more when I finally do find that copy, knowing that it took me a year essentially to save up enough money to buy that card. An example that I have, my son, I think he was maybe 10 years old at the time, wanted one of the Game Boys, some portable video game system. I forget which one it was, but he wanted one of those. And I think they cost maybe $150. And I'm sort of going by memory here, but you'll get the idea. So let's say it was $150. He could have easily asked for one for his birthday or for Christmas, and between his mom or me or my parents or her parents or a combination, he probably would have gotten that Game Boy system for either his birthday or Christmas. But he wanted the money to go and buy it himself. So for his birthday, he was born in September, and for Christmas one year, he said, I don't want anything else. I just want money because I want to be able to save up and buy that myself. So his birthday came around. We did buy him some other things, but we gave him some money. And then Christmas rolled around a few months later and gave him some more money. And so he had saved up enough to be able to afford that Game Boy. And when I think we went to Best Buy, something like that, and he picked the one out. I think they had different colors or whatever. I think he got a red one. And so he picked it out and he was so excited. He went up to pay for it. Well, when he gave it to the person behind the register, they, of course, instinctively looked to me to say, okay, well, this will be $150 plus tax. And my son all knew about tax as well, so he knew it would have to be a little bit more. And of course, they sort of looked in my direction of, oh, that'll be, $150 or whatever it came out to be with tax. And my son's like, no, I'm paying for it. And he had his little envelope with all the money in there. I think it was even more than enough to pay for it. But you should have seen the look on his face when he pulled out and started counting out all that money needed to pay for it, because he sacrificed getting other things that he may have wanted for his birthday and Christmas, and instead wanted some money so then he could go out himself and buy that Game Boy. And he was so proud of himself that he was able to have his own money to be able to buy it. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with consolidating your collection. Like I said, there's so many ways to collect. Some people may not have a lot of room, so it may be almost a necessity for them to say, you know what, I can't have a large collection. I just don't have the room to store it, to display it. And I'm not really interested in a 1979 Topps Raleigh Fingers. Okay. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm not interested in that card. I want a 1954 Red Heart Mickey Mantle. Okay. And they're several $1,000s, even in low condition. That's the card that I want. I want those types of cards in my collection. Well, to do that, again, with limited funds that most of us have, unless you save and maybe buy one card like that per year, if you want more cards, even though it's a consolidated collection, if you want to be able to buy more cards, maybe one a year, you may have to consolidate your collection. So I don't think it's a situation of is it good or is it bad. I think it's just an opportunity for collectors to be able to afford some of those more expensive cards by consolidating. Me, I've chosen the tortoise path, that eventually over time I will add some of the more expensive cards that are out there to my collection, but it's going to be a sacrifice. It's going to be saving over time to be able to afford those cards, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm going to sell off a whole bunch of my collection, take that money, and now I can go buy these 2 or 3 cards or whatever the case may be, these more expensive cards to add to my collection. Now, the other aspect that Graig wanted to know is if there is a movement within the hobby of saying, you know what, I just don't want all these cards in my collection, I want to consolidate. And there's a large effort within the hobby to start selling off cards that you may not be interested in it, and everyone out there starts consolidating their collection. What that would do to the card prices of all those cards that are now being sold. I think it would take a huge movement within the hobby to have all those cards flood the market and increase the supply. And if there's more basic economics, that there's a lot more supply of something and demand doesn't rise to meet that additional supply, then prices go down. Okay. If I were to decide to consolidate my collection and sell off 100 cards, that's not going to do really anything to those card prices. It's not going to move the needle that much. It's not going to increase the supply, because we're talking about one copy of a particular card that may be for sale. If 100 people decided to consolidate their collection and they happen to be selling, say, 50 of the same cards to consolidate their collection, I think even that wouldn't be a dramatic movement in those card prices, because some of them are already very affordable because there are a large supply, or a large enough supply out there, and not as much interest. And I don't, it would take a large majority of collectors out there to say, I don't need all these cards, I'm just going to sell most of them and consolidate my collection. I'm of the opinion, I'm like John Mangini. I love baseball cards, and I want as many different examples of the different Hall of Famers, different copies of cards in different sets. I would love someday to get into pre-war cards and just go down that rabbit hole. I'm not at that point yet, but I don't see a large majority of collectors in the hobby suddenly deciding to consolidate their collection and flood the market with all these vintage cards, crashing prices for those cards. I think maybe over time, as collectors mature, as their situations change, they may be in the need for some money for other purposes in their life, and they decide one way to do that is to consolidate their collection. So it doesn't always have to be hobby focused. I think maybe over time, as us collectors get older and older, there may be a greater desire to consolidate your collection. I'm not at that point yet. I don't see myself. I have sold a couple cards, but they're strategic sales in order for me to do other things. Downgrade. I downgraded a 1957 Topps Frank Robinson rookie card because I didn't like the eye appeal of the one that I had. I sold a Warren Spahn card to do the same thing, basically to get my BVG copy out of my collection and get a PSA copy in my collection. So I just essentially swapped cards. So my sales that I've done recently and may do in the future are going to be specifically targeted to deal with my BVG graded cards. So I don't see that as a consolidation effort. But like I said, to get back to Greg's point, is it a good thing to consolidate your collection? In some cases, it may be for you. If you really want, if there's a card out there that is your dream card, that is a card that you've dreamt of having in your collection for years, but even in a low grade is going to cost several $1,000s. And you don't want to wait, to save up 5 years or 3 years or however long it would take to scrape funds together to finally be able to afford that card. You want that card now. And you're sitting on some cards that you just don't really care about. And you say, hey, I can sell those and get the money and then be able to afford my dream card. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. At the same time, I think in my situation, there's nothing wrong with having a larger collection, knowing that you may have to sacrifice and it may take a much longer time frame to be able to afford some of those more expensive cards. Again, it's a choice that all of us have to make, and there's pros and cons to each one. So, Greg, another excellent question for all of us for your question of the week. Would love to know in the comments, are you looking to consolidate your collection? And if so, why? Is it space? Is it monetary reasons? Is it to be able to afford a couple big cards that you've always wanted in your collection, but you have no other way to afford them? Or are you like me? Are you more quantity oriented at this point and just love buying sports cards and adding them to your collection, knowing that you may not be able to afford some of those more expensive cards as easily? So with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.